The prose poem, I emphasize, the prose poem that we are going to be considering today is Meditation 17 of John Donne, and it is prose, but it's very poetic, and in fact, for many people, they know it as the poem, and that's the part of the text which I am going to read. The text, almost the full text, you'll find below, and it's worthwhile reading it now, and as well reading especially the emphasized part in the second text below, which is from Kant's critique of pure reason, of practical reason. Now, this is in light of the fact that the last presentation was that of Walt Whitman's When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. And this is the other side of the learned astronomer. And in the presentation last week, we framed it in terms of Kant at the end of the critique, in which he writes, "Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The more often and steadily we reflect upon them. The first, the starry heavens above me, and the second, the moral law within me." And about the second, Kant goes on, "The second begins with my invisible self, my personality, and displays to me a world that has true infinity, but which can only be detected through the understanding and with which I know myself to be in not, as in the first case, merely contingent, but universal and necessary that connection. The first perspective of a countless multitude of worlds, as it were, annihilates my importance as an animal creature. The second, on the contrary, infinitely elevates my worth as an intelligence through my personality, in which the moral law reveals to me a life independent of animality and even of the entire world of the senses. I emphasize the word in reading, my personality, the moral law. It's about who I am. And a bell is tolling. Traditionally, when somebody died, when somebody passed away, the community was notified and summoned to a funeral by the ringing of the church bells. Donne is in a period of great sickness, and these meditations were written over a period of 23 days, one meditation per day, until he rose from what seemed to be his deathbed. And Donne is pondering on the sound of the church bells, and he has a line that has become part of literature in a more fundamental way. It's the title of a book by Hemingway. When we hear the church bell, we normally ask, I wonder who it is who's died. And so reading this as a poem, and these are the words of Donne, part of the entire meditation. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for me. The death of the other, the death of my fellow human being, is a death for me, of me, because I am part of the greater whole, as a clod of earth is a part of the greater whole of Europe. Now, of course, this poem is speaking about an essentially moral position. It is about the responsibility and the identification that I have with the other. And it stands as the other side of the starry heavens which I contemplate, which Whitman, the poet, wanders away from the scientist discussing charts and diagrams. He leaves the astronomer behind and goes out into the starry, into the misty, mysterious night, and wonders at the glory of the universe. And rather than looking up, this poem points to the moral aspect. And the moral aspect of the human condition is not looking beyond self to the distant universe, but looking within self in some way to find my connection with a horizontal connection with those around me. And if you will, we can take note of the totality of the world of creation, which we say in the song of Shabbos, Mizmor Lishir Liyom HaShabbat, the song of the day of Shabbos, that we say of God, Ma godlu ma'asecha, how great are your acts, are your worlds, are your deeds, the starry heavens, how vast, how magnificent, yes. Me'od umku machshvosecha. But if we were to get into the mind of God, then it would be very deep. And the poet, if you will, gazing at the starry heavens, is not excited, if you will, by the astronomer who is trying to find the idea, the machshava, the scheme, the blueprint behind the heavens. And similarly, when we look at the issue of the other, we can look at the vastness and the sheer numbers of human beings that we encounter. But our encounter with them should not simply be one of wonder of the multitude of people, but to look into what do I stand in relationship to all these others. And for that, we have to perhaps look in ourselves. Now, we're talking about morality, as Kant himself says. Morality. And this, of course, is what Donne is talking about. I owe something. I am part of. I am connected. I can't stand outside. Well, it's not I for whom the bell is ringing. We are all connected. There are many theories in philosophy of morality. There is the theory of Kant himself, of the categorical imperative, the deontological theory. There are the consequentialist theories that the morality of a thing is justified by its ends. If they have good ends, then as long as it had good ends, even if the means were not so kosher, okay? Morally, it's justified. The means are justified by the ends. And there's a third, a theory the philosophers relate to Aristotle, and we know the Rambam certainly maintained this theory, and that is the theory that morality comes out of an essential sense of virtue that is part of the personality. In other words, it comes out of doing the right thing, which is what we usually associate with morality, comes from being the right kind of person. And if we have a model of how do we know what doing the right thing is, well, we say the right thing is the way God is Rachum, and Chanun is merciful and gracious, and so on and so forth. And we adopt these 13 attributes of God about the way we do things. Then according to the Rambam's formula in the laws of virtue or character traits in Hilchot Deot, in the very first chapter, we've misunderstood. It's not simply doing the right thing. Doing the right thing Yes, but that comes from and requires us to be the right way. And we've dealt with the idea of be kind, be kind, be kind in Michael Blumenthal's beautiful poem that we've dealt with on this channel, on this playlist. But again, I repeat, the Rambam formulates it, follows. There are a number of different formulations. The Rambam takes the formulation Mahu, as he, meaning God, Nikra Rachum, as he is called Rachum, Af Ata, so you too, Heye Rachum, you must be merciful, and so on and so forth. It's about being. And from virtue comes morality. Now, I want to share with you two sources that come from the school of the great yeshiva in Volozhin. The first is from the founder, and it's told us by his son and successor, Reb Itzela Volozhiner, who tells us in the introduction to Rav Chaim Volozhiner's classic sefer, classic book Nefesh HaChaim, who tells us about his father, and his father was all the time, okay, whatever it was, he was looking to help other people, looking to help the other. A life of active moral choices. And then he puts an autobiographical note, because he's writing now about himself, not about his father. V'haya ragil lehochiach oti. It's about his father. His father, he says, my father would regularly reprove me al shera'a, that he saw, that he understood about me something. Sheineni mishtatef b'tzara da'achrina, that I don't participate in the pain of the other. Now, we know biographically that Rabbi Yitzchak Volozhiner did great, wonderful things to the degree that he was able for Russian Jewry. So why is his father criticizing him? He said, yes, you act in a particular way and you act very morally, but you are not feeling, you are not experiencing, you are not empathetic the pain of the others. The pain of the others means that if another person suddenly breaks his arm, it's not just that I'm sorry and I help him and I take him to the doctor, but that more than that, I feel, as it were, that my arm is breaking. Or as the story is told about Rabbi Levine, who once went with the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, who once went with his wife to a doctor. His wife had great pain in her leg, and the doctor said to Rabbi, what's the problem? And he, answering for his wife, he said, our leg hurts us. Tzara da'achrina. And this is the son-in-law and successor and Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin for almost 40 years in Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, writes in the introduction to Sefer Bereshit of his classic commentary on the Torah, Hamek Dovar. He says, why were the Avot, what was the greatness of the Avot? The greatness of the Avot was that they were Yashar. They were not just tzaddikim, they were yesharim. And what does it mean to be yashar? And he goes on to explain. To be yashar is to be concerned in an empathetic way, in a way of love. You feel the pain of the one you love, to love the other, and to feel their pain, and to act on their behalf, no matter who they are. And of course, this is the way Chazal describe Avram Avinu. Okay, and the way we should be, ohev et habriot, to love all the others in the world, umekarvan laTorah, and to bring them near to Torah. And this is known as the derech of the Yesharim And of course, if you look carefully in the Rambam, in the first chapter of Deot that I've cited, you will see that the Rambam calls this way, which he defines as the middle way, he calls it Derech Hayashar. It is about Yashar. It is straight. When is the first instance where morality is called upon in the Torah? Morality is being defined as the relationship between one person and another. I believe the first instance is that when Adam is discovered by God hiding in the Gan, hiding in the forest after he has eaten along with Chava, with Eve, from the fruit of the tree, and God asks him, "Did you eat from this tree?" Hamina Eitz, a theme which we took up in the poem on a theme by Thomas Merton, by Dennis Levertov, and for those who want to go beyond the short presentation that I gave, there is a much longer presentation that you can find on this theme connected with Rosh Hashanah on the website of Beit Avichai. Ha'isha asher natata imadi. And what does man respond to God? And here comes the first immorality. He says, "Aha, ha'isha asher natata imadi. He natnali mina eitzvocha." The woman that you gave to me. I mean, I didn't ask for her, did I? You gave it to me. She gave me from the fruit of the tree, and I ate. Well, Chazal, the rabbis, understood very well. Man is an ingrate. He was lonely. He was alone. He jumped for joy, as it were. Zot hapam. The bells are ringing. The first bell ringing this time. In Hebrew, pam means a bell. And Adam said, Zot hapam. Etzem me'atzamai. Vasar mibsarei, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Lazot ikarei isha. This is a worthy person. She's an isha ki meish lukacha zot. Yes, that was a bell, but it rang for him in joy, and therefore he should have had a quality of gratitude. Instead, he does something immoral, and it is immoral to be a kfui tov. It is immoral to be an ingrate. That is why, after all the things we ask for in Shmon Esrei, in the Amidah prayer, we then say, we are grateful. Modim anachnu lach. We are grateful for what you give to us, God. We can't be a kfui tov. It's immoral. And the idea of the other. I'm recording this in a time, I don't know when people will be listening to it, if they will, but perhaps you'll be listening to this in a time when COVID-19, the coronavirus epidemic, was a thing of the past. And you'll learn, you'll remember, or you'll read that people being told that masks protect you and protect the other from being infected, and protect the other from being infected. Nonetheless, huge numbers of people refused to wear masks. What responsibility, what morality, what concern for the other is lacking. How could people live that way? One last note. The bell, ask not for whom the bell tolls. Pay attention to the tolling of the bell. We have dealt with, and we deal with, a tolling of the bell every year. It's called the shofar. And both the bell, that is the shofar, and the bell that signifies my connection to the other, whomever it may be, both of them live in the world of music as metaphor, music as morality. And of course, poetry is in words, and we can use words to explain poetry, even though, of course, what is missing is the poetry. But music is beyond words, and nonetheless, there is the ringing of the bell, a music, and perhaps we can comment on that. And there is the blowing of the shofar and the sound of the shofar, and we can comment on that. So perhaps at some point we will talk about the metaphor of metaphors.